So the UN have just got done in a meeting to finalise the UN Migration Compact. That's, funnily enough, has still had no mention in the British media. Pretty much every single country, to my understanding, was absolutely fine and dandy with it. So remains to be seen now if what Merkel was on about will come to fruition, and that was, of course, where she said that if 2/3 of the countries involved in the compact agreed to make the pact binding, then it would become binding by default as a way of majority. Time will tell. Nonetheless, in the background, the propaganda has already started regarding migration, and I'm not going to spend too much time talking about what shit they've been pumping out, because it's just the same shit, different day really in that regard. Granted, the narrative's changed ever so slightly, but still the same pish. I want to kind of touch upon, delve a wee bit deeper into the articles and whatnot that led up to this compact becoming what it is now, because there seems to be a very large group of journalists and whatnot out there that seem to be misleading people by proclaiming to debunk the myths, and they claim that there's a lot of fear mongering going on regarding this compact, and they claim that this compact is nothing more than if for any time migration is needed, then it'll be safe and legal, and it's a way to ease problems in these countries to prevent migration, which is just, I don't understand if it can run with that narrative. I mean, I'm hoping to God that they're lying and they're not thick. You know what I mean? Nonetheless, so your man, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, has said in his message commemorating International Migrant Day that migrants are a powerful drive of economic growth and understanding and dynamism. This month, the world took a landmark step forward with the adoption of the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly and Regular Migration. Backed with overwhelming support by the membership of the UN, the Compact will help us to address the real challenges of migration while reaping its many benefits. Yes, those many benefits. At the expense of what, though? People-centred and rooted in human rights. Calling the Compact people-centred and rooted in human rights, sorry. He stressed the Compact points the way toward more legal opportunities for migration and stronger action to crack down on human trafficking. Now, right there off the bat, how did you come to a solution? We've got an illegal migrant crisis going on right now. So what to do is let's just create more legal opportunities and crack down on the invisible human traffickers. And let's not forget here, the human trafficking narrative kind of died a death a long time ago. It was such bullshit, you know. Originally, you kind of bought into it. You had no reason not to. But when you think of what a trafficker is, you would think that they would be on the boat with them, trying to sneak them into Europe, past all the necessary coast guards and whatnot. But then it became pretty apparent that these people were just jumping on boats with their satellite phones and phoning coast guards and NGOs who coincidentally were out sailing looking for them just in case there was any so-called rescue missions that needed to happen. These human traffickers don't exist, so to use that as justification to pass some shitey fucking migration compact to combat human trafficking, that's a bit of a low blow, is it not? Anyway, take you back to 2012 to Peter Sutherland, who at the time was the same lard arse who actually created the Global Forum on Migration and Development, which subsequently led to the Migration Compact. And he said, EU should undermine national homogeneity, says UN Migration Chief. He told the peers the future prosperity of many EU states depended on them becoming multicultural. He also suggested the UK's government immigration policy had no basis in international law. Mr. Sutherland, who is non-executive chairman of Goldman Sachs International and a former chairman of oil giant BP, heads the foreign migration blah blah blah. He told the House of Lords Committee migration was a crucial dynamic for economic growth in some EU nations, however difficult it may be to explain this to the citizens of those states. An ageing or declining native population in countries like Germany or southern EU states was the key argument, and I hesitate to use the word because people have attacked it, for the development of multicultural states, he added. Yes, fuck the encouragement of native births, let's just have multicultural states. That's a great idea. And what that effectively does, as everybody knows, is it turns one country full of one type of people into a country where everybody's different, or the same in one regard, but different in the sense that the natives are no longer the natives, and so on and so forth. Anyway, so even in 2012, they were talking about the need for immigration in the future and ways to manage any potential migrant attempts, and of course to reject the idea of being some form of homogenous within your country, because that has to go. Of course that has to go. So this was 2012. Then along comes 2013. Resolution adopted by the General Assembly on the 3rd of October 2013. Declaration of the High-Level Dialogue on International Migration and Development. We, representatives of states and governments, gathered at United Nations headquarters in New York on the 3rd or 4th of October 2013 on the occasion of the High-Level Dialogue on International Migration and Development. Recognise that international migration is a multi-dimensional reality of major relevance for the development of countries of origin, transit and destination, and in this regard, recognise that international migration is a cross-cutting phenomenon that should be addressed in a coherent, comprehensive and balanced manner, integrating development with due regard for social, economic and environmental dimensions and respecting human rights. Acknowledge the important contribution made by migrants and migration to development in countries of origin, transit and destination, as well as the complex interracial relationship between migration and development. Decide to work towards an effective and inclusive agenda on international migration that integrates development and respects human rights by improving the performance of existing institutions and frameworks, as well as partnering more effectively with all stakeholders involved in international migration and development at the regional and global levels. Well. So there was talks of this in the pipeline, and bear in mind this is years before the migrant crisis or the refugee crisis even started. They're talking about an effective and inclusive agenda on international migration, and they want to improve on existing frameworks and create more partnerships, etc. Oh, well, you then tie that in with the Agenda 2030 narrative, or revelation even. And point 29 says, we recognise the positive contribution of migrants for inclusive growth and sustainable development. We also recognise that international migration is a multi-dimensional reality of major relevance for the development of countries of origin, transit and destination, which requires coherent and comprehensive responses. We will cooperate internationally to ensure safe, orderly and regular migration. Safe, orderly and regular migration. And this is in 2013. Involving full respect for human rights and the humane treatment of migrants regardless of migration status, of refugee and of displaced persons. Such cooperation should also strengthen the resilience of communities hosting refugees, particularly in developing countries. We underline the right of migrants to return to their country's citizenship and recall that states must ensure that the returning nationals are duly received. Right? So 2015 would roll around, and the refugee crisis would coincidentally start. It just seems to have fallen perfectly into place in order for them to act upon the things that they'd drawn up in 2013. Does it not sound a bit strange? Nonetheless, the refugee crisis soon became the migrant crisis, and the story goes on, as you all know, as to what it became. And as a result of that crisis towards the end, they managed to finalise the Migration Compact to make it safe and legal to prevent any of these harrowing deaths from happening again. But just after 2015, and we entered 2016, the New York Declaration for Refugees and Migrants was brought to the fray. We, the head of state and governments and high representatives meeting at United Nations headquarters in New York on September the 19th, 2016 to address the question of large movements of refugees and migrants have adopted the following political declaration. Since it's fucking mental. Oh my days. Since earliest times, humanity has been on the move. Some people move in search of new economic opportunities and horizons. Others move to escape armed conflict, blah, 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 blah. Still others do so in response to the adverse effects of climate change, natural disasters, some of which may be like the climate change, blah, blah, blah. We have considered today how the international community should best respond to the growing global phenomenon of large movements of orchestrated migration and refugees. We are witnessing in today's world an unprecedented level of human mobility. More people than ever before live in a country other than which they were born. Migrants are present in all countries in the world. Most of them moved without incident. In 2015, the number surpassed 244 million, growing at a rate faster than the world's population. However, there are roughly 65 million forcibly displaced persons, including 21 million refugees, 3 million asylum seekers, and 40 million internationally displaced persons. In adopting the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development 1 year ago, we recognised clearly the positive contribution made by migrants for inclusive growth and sustainable development. Right? Refugees and migrants in large numbers, often face a desperate ordeal. Many take great risks, embarking on perilous journeys, which many may not survive. Some feel compelled to employ the services of criminal groups, including smugglers, Others may fall prey to such groups or become victims of trafficking. Even if they reach their destination, they face an uncertain reception and a precarious future. That tends to happen when you're a Gambian and you come over and proclaim to be Syrian. Nonetheless, we are determined to save lives. Our challenge is above all moral and humanitarian. So let me get this straight. In 2012, or probably even before that, there was talks of putting things in place in the event of, let's say, any drastic crisis, perhaps. Then in 2013, they put the wheels in motion regarding wanting to create safe and legal routes for migration and to improve upon existing frameworks, etc. Then 2015 rolls round and the migrant crisis coincidentally starts, and lo and behold, they've got the answer to the problem. The problem they've so been seeking. And here you have it. The point of bringing up the things that I've just brought up there was purely to show you how, when you compare that to the narrative regarding the refugee crisis, how it becomes pretty obvious how a lot of this has been contrived and orchestrated from the start. And a lot of the people that are trying to claim that this UN migration compact isn't actually about migration to the extent that some think it is, they're either lying or they're completely misled, because in the background, the whole basis for why this was created was in fact for a large movement of migration. Don't stop talking about it in all their older documents. The final one that I'll leave on is this one: making migration work for all. And this is from late 2017, December the 12th, 2017. Migration and the urgency of international cooperation. Managing migration is one of the most urgent and profound tests of international cooperation. Migration is an engine of economic growth. That depends on who you get in your country. Nonetheless, right, you come down. The drafting of the Global Compact on Safe, Orderly and Regular Migration to be adopted in 2018 is an opportunity for member states to reinforce the benefits of migration, to bring the challenges it creates under control. Member states have made numerous relevant commitments in an extensive body of international law, blah, 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 blah. The time for debating the need for cooperation in the field is past. Migration is an expanding global reality that coincidentally only became a problem just after you started conjuring up your documents. There are an estimated 258 million international migrants who technically now can all just fucking come over here if they want. The majority of these migrants move between countries in a safe, orderly and regular manner. The UN calculates that the total number of international migrants has grown, blah, 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 right? And then finally, if you come down, while I believe that member states should work on expanding legal pathways as a matter of both sound policy and principle, national and subnational authorities need to consider pragmatic and rights-based options for managing irregular migrants within their borders. While voluntary return or even forced return are options, they will often not be desirable or even feasible. I am concerned that in a period in which many countries are implementing increasingly restrictive border management measures and may see returns as a deterrent to irregular migration, authorities risk breaching their basic human rights obligations. Return efforts are expensive, difficult to effectively implement, and problematic to carry out at scale in accordance with Human rights law. It is not clear that returns have their supposed deterrent effect. The limit data on the effectiveness of return programs suggest that if they are not coupled with robust reintegration programs and where root causes for irregular migration persist, migrants, including those previously returned, will still undertake perilous journeys. You fucking wankers. They're just making excuses for these people now at this point. So, in the space of 4 or 5 years, all of a sudden, Africans just can't stay in Africa. They can't be contained. So we're gonna just have to bend over backwards and let them in. Is that really how you're wanting to portray this? What a load of shit. What an absolute load of guff. Absolute treachery at its fucking finest. Particularly when irregular migrants have long been established in a country and follow the law other than with regard to their status. Alternative avenues to return are vastly preferable. There is no one-size-fits-all approach. As I have noticed, there is a spectrum of options for addressing irregular migrants, and the member states must decide which are best suited to their circumstances. This spectrum includes, but is not limited to, facilitating access to health, education, housing and other services on a non-discriminatory basis regardless of nationality, issuing temporary stay permits for work, study or humanitarian purposes, often permanent residency, or creating pathways to citizenship. So some African decides to up sticks and leave because he's wanting to flee poverty or he's wanting to get a better education. He comes over here because he's got a right to do so thanks to the UN. And instead of at some point incentivizing them to go home, we've just kind of gone, nah, you know what? It's too expensive. So instead, what we'll do is we'll give you potentially permanent residency and a permit to work and study while you're here, and maybe create a pathway to citizenship instead of just sending them back, which would have stopped the migrant crisis in its tracks way back then, or at the very least fucking send them back when whatever reason they were fleeing has been solved. But then it becomes clear, as I've said in multiple videos prior to this has got nothing to do with what they claim. This is all to do with as much mass immigration as humanly fucking possible. It might not happen right now, but you will see it happening. It's happening in multiple countries anyway, and that's just near enough as a result of the migrant crisis, quote unquote, which ain't going to happen now. This video's far too long. Apologise. Peace.